Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Noah Askin. I am an assistant professor of teaching organization and management at the University of California, Irvine. I'm also a visiting associate professor of organizational behavior at INSEAD. And welcome to INSEAD Digital. This is one of our tech talks. This is a journey through product management and entrepreneurship with a really special guest today, Saxena, who we're going to be introducing in just a minute. Want to just quickly thank the sponsor of the Tech Talks, Accenture, our partner here, which is wonderful. Also would like to thank Lovish Gidwani. If Lovish, you want to pop in and say hello real quick. There's Lovish. You'll see him again later today. He is the vice president of the INSEAD Blockchain, FinTech, and Web3 Club, and he was really responsible for making all of this happen. So that's the welcome, the introduction. Just very briefly, want to run through our webinar etiquette. You've probably done many of these. Maybe it's been a little while since we've slowly morphed away from a fully online life. You'll be muted throughout. Videos off, chat is closed. There's the Q&A tab at Zoom. You're probably all familiar with that at this point. If you have questions for the speaker, please put those in. Lovish is going to be checking that out, going to be seeing what people are asking about, and then we'll spend the last 10 or 15 minutes of the webinar today going through your audience questions. You can put in your own questions, of course, but you also have the opportunity to upvote others' questions for the ones that are most relevant. And of course, the ones that end up on top are likely to be the ones that get asked. We are going to record the webinar, and if you have any technical issues, if there's a problem with the sound, the video, etc., you can see the email for digital at INSEAD right there. Those are the logistics. Don't want to waste any more time because really would like to get speaking to Sanchan. If Sanchan, you want to come in and say hello.
Hey, everybody. Excited to be here.
Well, welcome, Sanchan. We're really excited to have you. I don't want to belabor your backstory, but it is super impressive, and we'll talk about it in more detail. So just to give everybody a little bit of a snippet as to who you are. So Sanchan is most recently a VP of product at Coinbase, and is now, you're on the board of directors for super.com, which I'm curious to ask you a little bit about as we get to that part of your career later. He was the head of product and general manager at Airbnb, was at Airbnb through COVID, which I can imagine generated a great deal of learning and a lot of stories. Was amongst the earliest, before that was amongst the earliest employees at Instagram when pre-revenue days, worked in Instagram shopping and ads and business products, spent time at Microsoft, Yahoo's entrepreneur and engineer, really just a super impressive background. And really happy to have you here today to tell us just a little bit about this. So thank you again, Sanchan, for joining us.
Thank you, Noah, for having me.
Great. So, you have this incredible resume at this point, but that doesn't come from nowhere. You surely started with sets of expectations with your education. Can you just tell us a little bit about the path that kind of led you up to the point where you started in product?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, there are two, I like to divide the world into two types of individuals. One who grew up and knew exactly what they want to do. LeBron James, Ronaldo, they were 14. They're like, I only want to play basketball. The other world is people like me. I did not know what I wanted to be when I grow up. It was more of a process of discovery. So in my engineering days, I was just fascinated with space. So I did an aerospace engineering. Now think about it. Starting in aerospace engineering to being in Silicon Valley and doing product and general management, it's like completely different scopes, So my journey is a journey of curiosity, led by pursuing that curiosity, realizing whether that thing that I'm now pursuing is exciting or not, and then pivoting and trying something else. So that has been the playbook, so to say, of my career. So started at Microsoft as an engineer after aerospace engineering. Happy to share how that happened. That was also a lucky break. But before that, I was also an entrepreneur. I tried my hands at entrepreneurship, didn't work out. All these experiences have taught me a lot of things that I went on to then apply to latter parts of my journey as well. In 2005, I landed at a place called Silicon Valley. Now we can talk about it. It's a very unique place. If you've only read books about it, I'm here to tell you the books and the reality are different. And I just got lucky to have landed over there, and that is where luck started to hit me. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times, many executives will tell you they had a 5-year plan. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. People like me will tell you there's a serendipitous aspect of building a great career as well. And you can actually increase your luck surface area by putting yourself in places that have opportunities that you would have never got otherwise. So my genius was to put myself in Silicon Valley. That's the only credit I'll take for the career that I've built. And then opportunities started to hit me in many different directions. I was right in the middle of innovation. And my first break happened at Instagram. And as a reminder, this was 10 years ago. So many of you might be very young. And at that time, you might not even know what Instagram was. But 10 years ago, Instagram, all you could do was 2 things. Add a photo and apply filters so you look prettier and beautiful, or whatever that might be. And you can comment and like. That is all that the company did. And I was amongst the first 100 employees of Instagram when it made $0 in revenue. And that was a rocket ship that fundamentally, in every career, there's a pivotal moment. That was my pivotal moment. I joined a smaller company, became really, really successful. And my job over there was to help navigate the product strategy and build new innovative products. Now, I'm not very proud of creating Kim Kardashian. I mean, she's amazing, but that's not what I'm proud of. What I'm proud of is creating the creator economy that Instagram pioneered, and then Snapchat and TikTok took it to the next level. Today influencers are legitimate businesses, but 10 years ago, we were helping the Kim Kardashians of the world figure out what this influencer and creator economy is. So that was the contribution over there. And then I went to Airbnb, early days as well. Not as early as Instagram though. That's when I transitioned beyond product management to general management. So I became the mini CEO, as you may, for a product called Airbnb Plus with P&L responsibilities. I ran product, engineering, design, operations, and everything else. So that was my first taste beyond product. And the last 2 years I spent at Coinbase. Again, Web3 crypto has its pros and cons, but I fell upon the pro side of it and helped build that company pre-IPO to IPO.
Great. That is, first of all, thank you for that overview. There's so much to dig into there. And a lot that I like in terms of the story of piecing it together, almost like a product manager. This didn't work. I pivoted. I tried that out, took the learnings with me where I went. And so there's a lot really there of using the language and terminology of product to your own career. I want to start with the 2 transitions, though. You said there was a bit of luck. You said there's a lot of luck, increasing your luck surface area, which I like. It's funny. It's something actually my father talks about in his career, like put yourself in the path of opportunity and luck, and it's more likely to find you. But I think it's really interesting to talk about the transition from being an engineer to landing at Microsoft to then ending up becoming a product manager. I think a lot of people with a background in engineer, maybe not a lot, but people with backgrounds in engineer often think about making that transition. So can you talk a little bit about those kind of 2 key transitions?
Yeah, happy to. So I think I'll start with the latter one first, and then we'll go back to the luck piece as well, because that's really important and a core philosophy of my life as well, just like your dad's. So I think product management is a very unique discipline. You don't get a degree in it per se, right? You get a degree in engineering, psychology, marketing, MBA, etc., but you don't get a degree in there, right? So I can almost assure you 100% of the people who are in product management came from different disciplines. They came either from design, engineering. I've seen a lot of people who came from marketing and became successful product managers as well. And one of my favorite product managers actually had a background in psychology, and he transitioned into product at Facebook and is an incredibly successful leader. And I think that transition starts with understanding what truly matters and what you get excited about. So to me, as an entrepreneur, I was never a specialist. I was more of a T-shaped individual where, I had certain things that I was really good at, but a lot of interest in other things, but I wasn't the best at, but had enough to be dangerous and have impact, so to say. So that was my journey. And I think the role of product is very interesting, where I define that as 2 core responsibilities. One is every company, doesn't matter if it's Pepsi or doesn't matter if it's Facebook, you have to answer a question: what should we focus on? What are the most important things to focus on? We could be a million things we could do, but what do we focus on and how do we win? That is squarely important for a product manager to nail. It's not just their sole responsibility, but a large part of their responsibility. And then the second one is, as we proverbially call it in Silicon Valley, get shit done. No amount of ideation is enough. I meet a lot of people who say, I'm great at vision, I'm great at articulating the big picture, but I forget, I'm not that good at details and execution. Well, let me tell you, in order to build a great career, you have to operate at the intersection of both of those things. You got to have a great vision and a great idea. You have to be the ideas guy or a girl, but you also need to know how to make things happen. Without that, you're not going to be able to succeed in any of these careers. So whether it's engineering, transition, etc., what I advise people is, if these are the two things you love doing, then start bringing those experiences to your transition. And the best advice is, if that's the passion you like, then only do it. I've seen a lot of people go into product or general management. I was a general manager at Airbnb, and I started doing more than product. And a lot of people don't enjoy that as well, right? So just because it's a glamorous thing, it's the most talked about thing, and you read these articles of product, people make a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, those are not the criteria. You have to truly enjoy doing this thing. Now, the first question you had, Noah, was around the luck surface area as well, which is an incredibly important thing. Unless you can nail down everything to a precise action plan, you have to accept the role of serendipitous stumbling upon things and discovering whether you like them or not. Nobody's born with a checklist saying, this is what I love, this is what I don't like, and you just go and pursue that. You have to discover those things in your career. I discovered that I loved aerospace engineering, then realized, man, the only way to go to space is to have a PhD. And I have a little bit of an energy problem where I can't sit for 5 years and do a PhD, it can't work for me. Okay, I'm going to pivot now, so that discovery wouldn't have happened before, so I think that's important to recognize. And in order to do that, all I encourage people to do is, whatever you're pursuing, just increase the probability of success by pursuing and going to places that allow you to do that. An example of this is, yes, you can be an actor from Timbuktu, but your probability of being successful actor is to go to Hollywood and have those opportunities stumble upon, right? Yes, you can build an amazing country somewhere in a remote part, but the probability of that happening is fairly low. I'm not discouraging you from doing that. All I'm saying is, if you're trying to increase the luck surface area, you go where you want to build that medical company or a research lab or biotech company or whatever that might be. And that is an intentional choice. What I mean by that is, don't let that be an afterthought. Let that be an intentional choice. Meaning, as you're thinking about your career, the amount of energy you spend figuring out what hard skills you want to learn, also spend amount of energy understanding how do you increase the luck surface area. How do you go to a place where you can stumble upon those things?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And it's interesting because in listening to you talk about this, yes, it's about putting yourself in the right places, but it's also about having a clear understanding of who you are, right? Some idea of what it is that drives you. And then it's also having curiosity, right? Because that you don't end up winding your way, and you've covered very different products, right? You've been more recently in Web3, but you've been in physical product and Airbnb, digital and physical. Instagram much more just purely software based. And so really those are big transitions. And so it's to think about it in retrospect from the lens of luck, certainly that happened, but also it's a clear understanding of who you are, what motivates you, and then a curiosity about what's next. And I think those skills really define product and good product managers very, very well. So it's nice to hear that put together. And so, so you made the transition, and then how do you look at your own personal growth, right? So you're learning skills, right? You need to develop the skills to be a good product manager. And I heard you on Lenny's podcast talking. Lenny Rachetsky, for those of you who don't know, has a wonderful podcast, interviews some of the most impressive leaders in product. He actually referred to you, Sanchan, as probably the hardest working person in product that he met. So luck is there, but there's also this hardworking component for sure. How do you think about developing your skills as a product manager? And I know we have a number of people on the webinar who are looking to get into product or maybe upskill within product if they're just getting started out. How do you think about your personal growth there?
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, you have the classic skills that you have to learn, which I would call, due to a lack of a better word, hard skills. Your ability to do certain tasks, certain things, etc. Those are hard skills. In case of engineering, that's learning programming languages and being able to code. In case of product, is actually writing the product spec, understanding what to build, etc. Those are hard skills. But then there are a bunch of other skills that I discovered, luckily, early on in my career that were equally important for you to succeed. These are things that are hard to learn by just reading books. So you have to have experiential learning. Example of this is truly empathy. A lot of people throw around the word empathy. You have to have customer empathy. What the heck does that mean? Let's say you're working in a B2B startup and you're building a product, but you're not even the customer of that product, right? How do you develop that empathy? How do you even understand what those people are, right? I joke about this, but it's true. When I got to Instagram, Kevin Systrom was younger and he was the quintessential customer of Instagram. But once he crossed a certain level, he could no longer relate to the customers of Instagram, right? He was 35 and above, right? So like just a small example to demonstrate that building customer empathy, understanding empathetic leadership, and understanding what that means is incredibly important. So those are those skills as well in this bucket. And there are many, by the way, how do you collaboration is a big thing. Nothing gets done as an individual contributor, right? You need to collaborate. You need to influence without authority. So a bunch of these soft skills are really important. So those are the buckets. And to me, the best way to do this was to actually do it. So I'll give you an example, and maybe it's not the right example for this audience, but like I had a lot of I had a huge debate in my career. I got into London School of Economics, I got into other MBA programs and other places, and I had an opportunity to go to Microsoft. And I was stuck in this decision, saying, oh my God, do I go do an MBA or do I do a Microsoft? What do I do? And the thing that worked for me, again, it's an N equal one, so all advice is dangerous. So please try this with restraint on your side, but I'll give the advice anyhow. Like for me, what worked out was learning by doing. So I made a critical decision. Again, you can call it luck or whatever it is, but to go and do the thing, then to study about how to do the thing, and that to me was the experience at Microsoft, Instagram, etc. So my advice to everybody is, have a few things in there. One, the opportunity to do what you're learning. It's really important. Hands-on experience is really important. Two, I have a video on my social media which talks about you need 3 people in your life. You need a mentor, you need a coach, and you need a therapist. I can come back to the therapist part a little bit later, but those who are 42 and above, like I am, you need a therapist too. but like you need a coach and a mentor as well. That's really important. That's a second piece of learning, right? And the third piece of learning is mindset. This is something I want to share with everybody. There's some of this myth that I learned that, if you're at the top, if you're the CEO, the VP of product, VP of engineering, whatever that is, CMO, whatever, right? You basically do everything right. That's why you got there. Well, I'm here to tell you, your hit rate is probably 60%. 40% of the time, you actually did something that didn't work out. Right? And it's true for every company. It's true for every leader, right? So your mindset around taking the bet, seeing it through, and not working, and then have the mindset, the grit, the tenacity to still go up and try that shot again at another thing is incredibly important. Right. So I think that's what I try to coach senior leaders as well in my team is that do you have that mindset and the grit and the perseverance? Again, a skill that you don't learn through books. You can learn through books as well, but you also learn through real life. I think those were the 3 buckets that I did. I figured out how do I learn, but practice. I got myself a mentor and a coach. And then I changed my mindset from getting everything right, to actually saying, I have a comfort level with 50% failure rate in my successes. And I'm going to continue to move forward in spite of that.
That's great. I mean, resilience is critical, not just in product, but pretty much everywhere these days. And that entrepreneur's mindset of get knocked down, get back up, I think is critical. And I just want to come back to something. So learning by doing requires getting a job, right? So you have to find yourself in a fortunate position of having that opportunity to learn by doing. And so, we've got a lot of MBAs, alumni, maybe people currently in programs right now who want to get into product. And it's it's a much hotter space to be in these days than it was 10 years ago. Silicon Valley was pretty hot back then for sure. But I'm curious if you have you've hired lots of product managers, you've hired product leaders. For people that are coming with maybe less experience specifically in product, they've learned by doing other things. They do have some of the classroom learning that gives them a little bit of the hard skills to be successful, but they may not have the reps of doing it live. Any advice that you would have for people that are looking to make that transition?
Yeah, great question. So I'll share two things. One is everybody in this audience is pretty lucky to be living in a time where doing cheaply things that were very expensive to do before actually exist. So today it's very easy to start creating software ideas using AI. You can actually create a website, you can try different things out, you can actually learn a lot of that stuff, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples in my career where I've hired someone who had zero experience in product. They were transitioning from either marketing, design, engineering, or somewhere else, but they had taken the initiative to actually do things and learn, and had formed a point of view around how those things should be done. One example would be, I don't know, I mean, I'm not going to use the name, but like this person had his mother who would cook really, really well. So what he did was, to learn to do that, he created a website where you can actually order food from her mother online, and he would go and deliver it over the weekends and during his summer vacation. An example of an entrepreneurial mindset. Again, he never pursued that career full-time. He got a job at Facebook instead, right? But that was an example where whatever he learned, he tried to apply in a real world scenario, right? Like, okay, who's the customer, right? Let me hone in on the customer. How do I speak to this customer? Where do I find this customer? What do they have as a customer journey to be able to buy these products that my mom is trying to cook and stuff? That is a very simple example, but if you look at the details of how you have to approach that same problem, it's very similar how you have to approach $1 billion product as well, right? You have to know the customer, you have to know their needs, you need to know their journey, you need to understand what the objections are, and you have to come up with those solutions, right? So this is an example of doing as well. The second bucket is equally important, which is, there is a lot of startups that actually do this thing called fractional participation. So there's this concept called fractional CPO, fractional head of product, fractional head of engineering, etc. So again, giving the audience encouragement that you're living in an amazing time. These are abundant times, where you can actually do a lot of these things, right? So I would just reach out to these companies while you're still in school, or even if you have transitioned later on, to actually do this fractional stuff, where you actually get skin in the game, you get equity in that startup, right? You don't get any cash component, but you get to try those things out in real world setting and learn from other peers as well. So this is roughly for the new grads, if you may, right? But there's also I have for those people who are experienced. One last thing is, a lot of these companies, Google, Facebook, Dropbox, Coinbase, have a rotational product manager program where they hire directly from school. So if those programs are available, I highly encourage you to do that, because that's a free education at these amazing. Now, if you're in an established role, let's say you're a marketer at Microsoft, you already have a job but in a different discipline, the easiest thing to do is to transition into product through apprenticeship. Every company allows you to do that. What it is, hey, I'm in marketing, but I have 30% of my time that I'd love to devote to product. You go to the product organization and say, I would love to help you out in these things. In the process, I will actually do that as well. And I've seen a lot of people transition from that angle as well. MBA overall is a great stepping stone for you to learn those hard skills, and then earn the right, so to say, hey, can I do this for you for free, for internship purposes, whatever that is, to do that.
Sure. Great. Thank you. That's, I'm sure, very well received advice and appreciated advice for many. And so I want to dig in now a little bit more and into the products that you've worked in, and at the same time, sort of the craft of product management, right? And I'm again coming back to this point around, you've worked in very different industries, on very different products, very different types of products. How different have you found the experience of being a product manager and product leader across these different industries and across these different types of products? And can you maybe touch on a little bit of the on a few of the differences that you found as you went from software and consumer facing to, more experiential at Airbnb, and then Coinbase, which, Web3 was a totally different beast. And then, and I'll just put this out there, but we'll come back to it, transitioning into AI. I believe super.com is probably using a heavy dose of AI. And so just thinking about those and that transition across types of product.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have been extremely lucky and blessed to have seen certain waves of innovation. The first one was the social revolution, Instagram, Facebook. Then 4 or 5 years later came another revolution, which was social sharing economy revolution, Uber, Airbnb, right? And then came Web3, and now there's AI, right? So one thing you have to take away from my N=1 experiences, in your career, you're going to see many disruptions and many different industries come around. And your job is to be able to ride those waves as the older waves become muted and newer waves come up, right? So you have to constantly re-innovate yourself, redefine yourself in these industries. Otherwise, you can't survive in today's world, right? What you learned 20 years ago is no longer relevant today. Not even what was relevant 5 years ago, right? So that's the context in which you have to build your career. Your career is going to be 30 years. At least 6 major waves will be there, and you got to ride all of those things, but otherwise you're going to be left behind. So that's the context. Now, if you think about product in particular, across industries, there are fundamental differences across these different industries. So, for example, when you use this phone, when you use Instagram, your product experience starts when you pick up the phone and ends when you put down the phone, right? So it's purely software, highly leveraged. You can launch something that gets to 1 billion people. You have no operations team. You have no CapEx, except the CapEx of the data center, maybe, but that's pretty much it. Now, if you go to Airbnb, Uber, it's a very different experience. The moment you put the phone down, you are for the first time experiencing the product of Airbnb, which is the home in which you are sitting. Okay? So as a reminder, Netflix product is not the app. It's the entertainment you get by watching the movies that you see. Airbnb's product is not the app. It's actually the memories you build with the family members and friends that you stay in a beautiful house. That is the product. Now, that's not a software product. It is software-enabled product, right? You are enabling that product through the lens of software. So these are fundamentally different things. Now, this is all B2C, business to consumer, but there's also a B2B angle to it, which is also very different. In B2B angle, you're working backwards from the customer who's an enterprise, and they have a different sales cycle, they have a different process around it, and you need to make sure you adjust your skills around there. So that's the second point for people to understand, that within that, there's a dichotomy around there. So how do you survive in this jungle gym? And by the way, this term jungle gym is what I would love everybody to use in their careers, because it's truly a jungle gym. There is no playbook, there is no thing that you can read and be successful. You got to truly go through the jungle gym. So depending upon which side of the equation you're coming from, you have to master a few things that'll be common, and then you have to learn nuances in every industry. So what are the common things? Look, whether you build a physical product or you build a software product, customer obsession is key. Building empathy for them is key. Learning about their jobs to be done and the needs that they have is incredibly important. So that skill set is an example of a skill set that will persist with you, whether you work at a software company like Instagram, or a physical product company like Uber and Airbnb, or Web3 crypto, which is completely new, and you're trying to bring those things. Now, the nuances that you will have to learn will be as follows. One is a way of working. So what do I mean by that? Customer price points. You have to understand what are the price points of different customers in different industries. And you'll have to learn those things differently. How does the customer derive value and ascribe value to your product is very different in Web3, where you're making money, versus in Airbnb, where you're actually, hopefully many people made money and many people lost too in Web3, but that's the intention on fintech. But in an experiential economy company like Airbnb, the customer's price point and the customer's value derivation is very different, because there's no monetary gain. So these are things you will have to learn as you go through these things. And my playbook is very simple. Start with curiosity. I'm a hands-on leader. This is another principle I love to share with everybody on the audience, is that, there's this myth that the higher up you go on the corporate ladder, you're leading through delegation. The more you do delegation, the more you do all of that stuff, you get basically in an ivory tower, and you don't know what to do anymore because you're far removed from that. So my advice to every leader is, continue to be hands-on, continue to know the customer, the industry, and the market that you're operating in, because that's how you're going to stay relevant throughout this industry growth as well. So you start with curiosity, and then you follow the same thing.
And in terms of the day-to-day or week-to-week or even team-based experience, are there things that stood out as being particularly different as you've gone from one company to the next? Certainly some of that will have to do with individual company culture, but also in terms of the fact that you're serving just different customers, the fact that your product is experiential versus software based. Anything in particular that stands out? I don't think you need to run through the whole list because I'm sure there's quite a bit, but it's just a few key things.
Yeah, I think the first one I would say is the speed of iteration. So, for example, Noah, you and your wife take a vacation with your kids, an Airbnb, and you show up over there, and I'm running an experiment. And there are no chairs in the house. There is no bed in the house. You're going to kill me. You'll be like, dude, I paid $10,000 for this. What is this? Right? But on the Instagram side, if I remove a feature here and there, if I hide it, if I introduce yet another one, you're taking a photo of a birthday celebration, right? And it crashes, something else goes wrong. Very different value proposition, right? So one biggest nuance difference that you have to understand is the risk tolerance of your customer also plays a big role in the risk tolerance of how you build products as well. So in pure software products, you can cut multiple times and have a little less loss on customers. But in physical experiential products, you got to cut very thoughtfully. You got to measure first before you cut, kind of thing. So in other words, let's take Coinbase as an example, or Web3 as an example. You're putting your life savings over there. There is no scenario in which you can mess with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So your approach changes, your mindset changes, the bar for shipping things significantly changes. The second thing is education. Crypto Web3 was a very different concept than experiential learning or Instagram. Instagram was taking photos, which everybody takes. Now you're taking on phone. Airbnb, everybody travels. Now you're staying in home. So I would describe that as disruptive, but in the vicinity of what people already understood.
Sure.
But in crypto and Web3, it's a brand new model. I'm trying to teach you how to do something that has no parallel to the previous things that you have done. Right? So that's another example where your marketing skills, your sales skills, your educational skills as a product leader matters a lot, because you're trying to bring 1 billion people to a new way of doing things that has never been done. Very different.
Yep. Yeah, that notion of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, just the day-to-day just changes because of those differences.
Yeah, and that's a question that I hear a lot. So I lead INSEAD's product management executive program, and the differences between the B2C product leaders and the B2B, right? Their risk tolerance for A/B testing is obviously vastly different. And I think just to dig in on that just quickly, how do you think about product optimization in the B2B, in the Coinbases of the world, where you don't have the freedom to run, Facebook allegedly runs 1,000 tests at a time, or whatever it might be, whatever the stylized fact is. How do you think about the product development, especially the sort of iterative product development, when you do have customers that are going to be much more resistant to having their experience tinkered with in that way?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember at Instagram, I'll show up at work, I'll open up Instagram, and I'll see, well, this looks different. What happened here? Oh, some engineer launched an experiment and the whole product looks different now, right?
Right.
I would never have that at Coinbase, for example. I mean, there'll be experiments, but they'll be much more thought out and much more planned around there. On the Facebook side and Instagram side, you can launch everything every second. The system is so beautifully designed that it can absorb millions of tests running at the same time, Right. So I think whether it's B2B or fintech, or health tech, these are very different ball games, right? So what I recommend people do is understand the customer's need, but also understand the customer's sacred cows, if you may, to lack of a better word. What are the things that are just non-negotiables in this market or in this domain? In case of fintech, it is typically never lose my money. It's like, you cannot launch a new feature or new something and all of a sudden, oops, we had a data loss. Oops, we lost people's money. That's just not going to fly. So this is just an extreme example, but there are non-negotiables in everything. In health tech, for example, privacy of personal customer records is incredibly important, right? So you understand these non-negotiables. And what you try to do is you, again, try to put together the approaches differently. So I'll give you two very concrete examples. in B2B scenarios or fintech scenarios, what you want to do is you want to work backwards from a customer expectation. What do I mean by that? The expectation is my money is safe. I can transact anytime I want. I can do blah, 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 like 5 or 6 things, right? You create that narrative, you create that promise to the customer, and then you work backwards from there, and there you do A/B testing, right? Mm-hmm. There you figure out what UI components to change. On the other side, when you're a B2C customer and you're starting off, my recommendation is to actually experiment at a rapid clip, because neither your customer nor you can define the non-negotiables upfront, right? So when we were launching Instagram shopping, we had to do a bunch of these things because it's a brand new thing that neither the customer is used to, nor we are used to. And now we have the right to actually experiment to derive value for those customers as well, right? So we will create those different approaches around this. So I call the B2B approach, a fintech approach, stack the bricks approach, meaning don't just launch one brick, launch the wall. Right. And within that, try a red color brick, try a blue color brick, try a small brick, try a big brick, right? But you launch a wall, right? On the B2C side, it's okay to ship bricks, some red, some small, some blue, some green. It's okay. And these are two distinct approaches to building products in different domains.
Sure. And thank you for that. I like that description. And you think about this, there's almost two approaches to take in terms, and it's a false dichotomy, but I think there's like a product strategy being forward-looking, and then there's the user research, which is, I don't want to say reactive because it's not, and the two are obviously very, very closely related. But how do you think about balancing these two things as you're thinking about building the wall or sending out bricks, right? Strategy is ideally a vision of where we're going to go and how we're going to win with this particular product. You know, user research is saying, okay, what is it that they want? And then how do you think about bringing these two together?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say a successful product strategy is a mix of some user research insights, some data analytical insight, because you probably have an existing product and you know something about the market. You're doing either market research or product research. And the third one being intuition and gut, you know? And I think a combination of those three things is really important. Now, I'm using the word gut and intuition, you know, in many textbook scenarios. Well, what are you talking about? You're betting us on hope? What are you talking about? But I'm here to tell you that any company that I've ever worked with had an element of gut and intuition that was neither backed by user research, not backed by data. But we believe that's the world we want to create. And as a result of that, we pursued that as part of the product strategy, right? So what I would say is, let's use research, 100 people. All of them said, I don't have a market for, I don't have a need for that. Doesn't mean you don't still do it. I'll give you a perfect example. This is 2005. There are zero, let's take this very real example. Let's say you're at Apple. This is 2005, and you're building a phone. The data scientist comes and tells you, look, I have looked at the market research. The MBA guy comes and says, look, I've done the market research. There are zero phones that have a virtual keyboard and make money. Zero, right? Everybody has a physical phone, keyboard. The user research team comes and say, look, I've talked to 100 people, and they all tell me that they don't like a virtual keyboard because their speed is low or typing. They all prefer a physical keyboard. Now, those things are necessary inputs, but then the intuition and gut still says, I'm going to pursue that because I believe I can create a solution that addresses all of their concerns. Right? So I think this is the most important thing to understand for audiences. Great founders, great operators start with a vision of the world they want to create in the absence of data that backs that exact world. But then they use the data of user research and analytics to understand the objections, understand the criticism, and try to come up with a product that overcomes those things.
Yeah. Yep. Right. And it's something about the overall user experience, right? So maybe the keyboard is a little bit slower, but the overall user experience is so far superior. So, and we can tweak on that, and as opposed to just focusing on the fact that this particular keyboard is not going to get the job done in the same way. Get the job.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Right? And we all know, another thing I'll say, again, I'm pretty sure the audience knows it, but it's always good reminder to hear is that customers only know their problems. We should only trust them. And there's a saying, right? Always listen to the customer. I think there's a little bit of a fallacy to that, you know? Always listen to the customer's problems, never to their solutions. Customers are hiring us to come up with the solution. We are an expert in the solutions, We don't have, we may or may not have the same problems with the customer, but customer is always right when it comes to their problems. But they're not always right when it comes to solution. The idea that a solution called a physical keyboard is what they prefer is because of the limitation of like the solution space that the customer has, right? But the problem that they have is the ability to type fast and get shit done fast and get the job done is an accurate problem. We're not going to debate them on that, right?
Sure.
But it's our job to increase the solution spectrum so we can build something that the customer can't even imagine today possible.
Yes. Yes, the focus on jobs to be done, so crucial. So
right.
It's what you've described from my perspective, if I can play back a little bit, is you obviously have the experience, right? You of both being in product and of understanding the industry. You've got the data to support these things, and then you have perspective, right? You have some, a little bit of intuition, gut, whatever you want to call it, but that stems from the combination of the data and the experience and the industry knowledge. And so that doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I want to then tie this into something you mentioned before about needing 3 key people, right? A mentor, a coach, and a therapist. I think, so how do you think about developing these things, right? Your hard skills, your intuition, your gut, your experience, and alongside, I call them a personal board of directors, perhaps, Gibson Biddle. I sort of borrowed that from him, and I teach it quite often there. I'm sure he's not the only one, and I'm definitely not the only one. But I'm curious as to how you view the roles of those 3 in terms of your own development across these different things that you need to be able to be an effective product manager and leader.
Yeah. One thing I'll touch, and then I'll jump into the answer. I'm speaking to an audience which is MBA background, very analytical, knows things around, right? So the word gut and intuition, we should probably take a moment to define that, because many people think it's some voodoo shit, it's like something that comes from nowhere. I'm here to tell you, gut and intuition is data. It's just not statistically significant yet. What do I mean by that? I have observed a few things. I have not observed them enough time to be able to draw a causation analysis behind it. But I see these things existing. It's not like I went to the Himalayas, did some meditation, and God spoke to me, and I came back and said, aha, this is what we should build. That's not gut and intuition, right? I mean, what I'm talking about is you're experiencing things, you're collecting that data, and you're building your gut and intuition. All you cannot do with gut and intuition is to decisively prove there is causation or causation going on over there yet. That's the only thing, right? It is data. It is not a dirty word. It is backed by data and others. It's just you develop over time. Now, the personal board of directors question is very interesting. And my spin on that was, like you need a coach, you need a mentor, and you need a therapist. And I did a video on this on social media. I have a YouTube handle called The Real Sanchan. You can follow me over there where I give you the real advice, the real talk, And one of the talk I said was, you need a mentor, a coach, and a therapist. Now, let me solve these problems for everybody. So you need a mentor or a coach or a therapist, because all of us suffer from what I call the unknown problem. We all know our known unknowns, right? But we don't know our unknown unknowns. So all of us have that. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care what school you went to. I don't care what genes you had. All of us have that problem, right? So in order to not be on the negative receiving end of your unknown unknowns, you need a mentor, a coach, and a therapist. The mentor's job is someone who can help you understand your unknown unknowns in the fastest way possible, because either they have the experience, they've gone through something similar, there's something that they relate to, but you're learning from them what I call softer skills of life. Things around, how do I show up when I'm stressed? How do I show up when I'm talking to the CEO founder like Brian Chesky, who is an inspirational, visionary guy? Like, how do I manage myself? So those are the things that where a mentor will help you, because they've seen those things happen before in one way or the other. I have another coach that I have, which is purely around hard skills. I missed certain hard skills because I went into engineering. I wanted to complement those hard skills that are my unknown unknowns. So I had a coach who was very much, like Ronaldo has a coach who teaches him about things. I have a coach who teaches me about things that I don't know, right? And I'm vulnerable with, right? And then the third is a therapist for my mindset, right? And that is something which I believe is equally important for your success, as much as your hard skills or as much as your life experiences will be. So the therapist helps me. It's my personal board of directors. A therapist is a professionally trained person who can talk to me and say, what are your darkest nightmares, Sanchan? What holds you from not being able to take the risk that you talk about, right? And by the way, I coach a lot of people, and they have the right hard skills, they have the right everything, but they're suffering from the mindset. They're not willing to take that risky bet or the risky promotion or the risky job because they're scared what will happen to their reputation or their career if they fail, right? That mindset is equally important for people to invest energy.
Yeah, and also just a deeper understanding of who you are and what do you bring to the table, right? Based on your own experience, personal, professional, otherwise, and how you show up in these environments. What happens when the stress gets turned up? What happens when the fear of going forward stops you, right, in your tracks? Like, how is it you respond to these things? So I love that. I think that's a really helpful.
And I have
bit of
by the way,
advice.
I have no qualms in saying I have a therapist. Many people have a qualm saying, "Oh, you have a therapist? Must be something wrong with you." No, it's not wrong. I'm trying to be better. I want to be better tomorrow than I'm today.
That's great. I love that. When a professor of organizational behavior says they have a therapist, everyone's like, "Yeah, of course you do." When when a senior product leader says it, it carries some weight. So that's great. I'm cognizant of the fact that we have a bunch of questions here in the Q&A, and I want to get to those. I did want to ask one last question. When we hopped on before the webinar started, you talked about differences between Silicon Valley and the kind of rest of the world, and perhaps the echo chamber nature of being in Silicon Valley. Can you just speak to a little bit of your experience there versus having, you've worked in lots of different places, but fundamentally based in Silicon Valley? Can you tell us a little bit about
that? So I think the Silicon Valley is a very, very unique place. It is so different. Let's use an example of an average and a standard deviation. If the average of the world is this, Silicon Valley is like 5 or 6 standard deviations away from it. In what dimensions? And number one dimension is culture. Failure or trying something and failing is almost like a badge of honor over here. That is not anywhere else. I grew up in India. I worked in Bangalore, which is the Indian Silicon Valley as well. I mean, it's a great place to be, but the tolerance of society amongst people of other people who have tried something, failed miserably, but stood up again and want to do it again is just ridiculously high over here. Nobody looks at your career resume and say, "Okay, you tried this, didn't work out. You must be not good," right? No, that's not the point. We understand that there are things that are beyond people's control. The question is, what are the learning aspects of that? 2 is full of technologists. So that's that's the problematic side of Silicon Valley. What do I mean by that? Right now, I'm in New York City area, New Jersey, New York City area. When I go to dinners, I have a finance guy on the table. I have a marketing girl on the table. I have different perspectives on the dinner table, right? In Silicon Valley, I only meet an echo chamber of people who only know how to do that kind of stuff, right? So it has pros and cons. Pro being the top guy working on AI is right there, right? But the con is that, we don't know how the rest of the world works, right? So it is actually a problematic thing, and we want to be more inclusive of the world that we are trying to solve for than what Silicon Valley has become. So those are the pros and cons. Pro being the culture is fantastic. I'm almost willing to bet you, I've been to London, I've been to other places as well. Until those countries fix the culture of what it means to try and fail and succeed again, they can copy as much as they want to copy Silicon Valley. It's just not going to happen.
Yep. That's great. And how do you think about driving? So obviously inclusion is a very important topic, very hot topic these days. If that is the way that you view Silicon Valley, how do you've talked about unknown unknowns, those come from people who are outside of your echo chamber. How do you personally think about that and take steps to overcome that?
Yeah, I think we absolutely need to change that. I mean, there is the traditional dimensions of diversity that we need to bring in, like more diverse candidates, more diverse voices, etc. So that's definitely Silicon Valley has to improve on that. And I mean, I think so does the rest of society, and so does the rest of other companies as well, but Silicon Valley in particular. But there's another dimension, which is, we just don't have the day-to-day habits of the people who are living in Africa, India, China, other places, London, right? So one of the things that companies try to do, like Facebook is a perfect example of this. Facebook had a philosophy that we will have local offices in London, and as an example, and the employees over there will build products for that market, right? Because you actually understand those customers, you can actually relate for that, right? Instead of having the other approach, oh, we are a US company, we're just going to throw whatever we build in America to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world will just adopt it, right? That used to happen, no longer the case, right? So one of the things that I'm very passionate and excited about is how do you build global companies where the employee base represents the customer base that they're trying to serve, right? And be able to scale that in a very efficient way. Like Facebook can afford to have a London office, an India office, a China office, all these things, right? But a lot of startups cannot, right? So how do you solve for that, right? That's an important question in my mind. And I honestly believe, especially in the world of AI, we cannot sit in Silicon Valley and decide how AI should react for around the world.
Yeah.
Which is too much of an echo chamber to be able to do that.
Yep. That's great. And I think that's a good point. Why don't we invite Lovish to join us? And because that was one of the top questions. And so I think that's a good opportunity. Lovish, if you want to come in and sort of moderate the Q&A and jump on that. Sanchan, I have about 500 more questions that I would like to ask you, but given our time here, I want to hand it over to the audience.
Yeah.
So I will come back at the end to thank you once again. But just before that, thank you for your candid answers and for digging in with us. And I leave you in the very capable hands of Lovish and look forward to hearing what you have to say to our audience here.
Thank you. And it's been such a fascinating conversation on building products, and many in the audience are echoing the same. So Sanchan, the first question we have is, what's your view on the upcoming digital product passport initiative from the European Commission and their intention to make this mandatory as soon as 2024?
Yeah, I mean, this is a part opinion, part fact kind of an answer. So I'll try to keep my opinion away and try to keep the facts in there. I think this, with all intent and purposes, I think it's a good initiative, and I think it's a right step in the right direction. However, as you can imagine, all good intentions have certain pros and cons. There's no decision in this world that is only pro; it has certain cons as well. So I think what'll be really interesting to see how these things manage the desire for individualization in every country and every culture versus unification. It'll be also interesting for me to see how we manage privacy around that, and how do we enable people to able to opt in, opt out as well. So those are some of the initial thoughts, which I think is a great initiative. I'm looking to see action happen around that, but I have certain reservations around whether this will be successful or not, but fully supportive of at least trying it out.
There are many questions around interviews. So I'll pick one. How do you view the way PM interviews are done, and what do you look for people when hiring talent?
Yeah, I think PM interviews are different at different level, as you can imagine. So when you're getting started, it's very much a hard skill focused interview. It's about trying to understand, do you know how to describe problems that are complex in simple terms? Do you know how to do analytical thinking, to think about how do you break down the impact of that thing that you're trying to do in an analytical term? So these are very different, and they're structured very systematically. For example, for junior to mid-level people, there are 4 interviews that happen at Facebook, Google, and other companies. One is about product sense. Can you think of a product, right? Do you have the sense to think of the product? Analytical, are you good with numbers, right? Number 3, can you work collaboration? Can you work with other people? And number 4, a sort of a case where you actually take a problem and solve it. Now, as you get senior in the product discipline, it becomes very different of an interview thing. Right? Nobody ever asks me, can I write a spec? Nobody ever asks me, can I do those kind of hard? Because they talk about, can I lead people? Can I motivate people? Can I inspire people? Do I have the grit and gumption to see when, at Airbnb, COVID happened and 80% of our revenue disappeared in 8 weeks. So think about it. In 8 weeks, you lost 80% of your revenue. So every chart is like this, not like this, like this. 100% of charts are going down. Can you lead in that environment? What do you say to people to motivate them at that time? How do you manage the business around that? So those are the kinds of interview spectrum I would define around there. And I think they're not perfect, but they are the closest approximation to what we need to assess in a candidate before we hire. I'll also say the one last thing. Interview process are never perfect. So I've seen them have false positives and false negatives, right? In both of those things. So if you get rejected by an interview, don't worry too much. There are many different ways in many different companies where you'll be successful, and it's not a perfect science.
Got it. And what do you personally look for people when you are hiring talent?
I think I look a lot for softer skills rather than hard skills. So I rarely ask in my interview, a problem or a case, say, okay, how would you solve this problem? What I'm looking for is, do they have examples where they have gone above and beyond in their life? It could be from their college work, it could be from their personal life, it could be from their product life. Two, are they resourceful? In life, resources are never a problem. Being resourceful is a problem. Are you resourceful enough to be able to do what you need to do with what you have, and be creative enough to actually figure out what to do with those things? So creativity, out of the box thinking is what I'm looking for as a second thing. And the last one is, can you be truly a leader? And this is a very important thing. Leadership to me is a mindset. It's not a skill set, it's a mindset. And I'm looking to see, in situations that are not in your control, in situations that are beyond your influence, how do you show up? Can you be a leader of people and galvanize them? Because as a reminder, product people, marketing people, we have to galvanize people, right? We're not good at everything. We need to galvanize the specialists and make them the thing happen that we need to happen. So leadership is really important.
And I think this would be very helpful for many in the audience joining us and trying to break into product. And as Sanchan, with Gen AI coming and all the industries and everyone trying to figure their way out with Gen AI, how is AI changing product development today?
Oh man, it is good.
How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, it's going to have a tremendous impact on product development. So a couple of things. When someone asks me that kind of question, I like to contextualize that. So the impact today and short term. Let's talk about the impact in short term, medium term, long term. Short term, all of us are going to become productive. You go to a Zoom meeting, notes are already taken for you, action items are already created for you. So in the short term, we are all going to get productive. If you're a product person or if you're a leader of people, sometimes you struggle because there's so much work to do, like take notes, action items, make sure you're following up, all that stuff. All that will be eliminated very, very quickly. So in short term, expect to become more productive. Medium term, expect to have impact. Again, I'm not going to all the details. I'll give you one in each bucket. Expect to have impact on headcount. So my prediction is in the medium term, you guys know the story of, you folks probably know the story of WhatsApp. 32 people sold the company for $19 billion, right? That will become the norm moving forward, because we're going to not need so many people to get the same job done, right? So in the short term, you will see the corporate structures changing significantly, headcount changing significantly. Look, my largest team that I managed at Coinbase was customer support. I had a head of customer support, and they had 4,000, 5,000 people. Let me tell you, that is not happening anymore. Right? Same thing with engineering. When I was growing up and studying engineering, the prediction was, even if AI comes around, we are going to eliminate blue collar jobs, like the mechanical things. Well, guess what? AI is actually eliminating the smartest jobs, engineering wise as well. Right? So engineers, you're going to need less engineers to build the next WhatsApp. Right? And long term, all of us have to figure out, what do we do? What is the meaning of life? When I wake up in the morning, what do I do? Because a lot of these agents are doing shit for me already. What does it mean to have existence? What does it mean to be a product leader, a CEO, a CMO in this new?
Well, interesting world indeed. And I think we have time for one last question. How is building products different in a startup versus a big tech?
Yeah, very different. So if anybody tells you, a startup is just a small part of a big tech, or a big tech is just an expansion of a startup, they're wrong. They're completely different things. Completely different things. In startup, you are in a discovery mode. You have a hypothesis, you have a vision, and you're trying to discover if what you believe to be true is actually true or not. So in startups, you don't do early planning. You don't even know if you'll survive after 6 months, right? Because your hypothesis might not even work out, right? So startup is a lot more brute force, is a lot more hypothesis driven, is a lot more outcome driven, And when you're building stuff in larger organizations, you already have distribution. So this is the second point that I want to make sure people understand. When you do a 0 to 1 product at Microsoft, Google, what is the superior advantage over OpenAI? You have superior advantages. You already have distribution. You have so many customers. OpenAI, Anthropic has to get customers too. They not only have to build the product, they have to crack distribution. Just because they build it doesn't mean they will come, right? The advantage of big tech product management is that you can build a feature or a product and you have an installed base that you can deploy it to, right? So completely different, product people at startups have to solve both building problem and distribution problem. In big tech, you already have distribution solved, so you have to iterate on distribution, but you have to focus a lot on the product side as well. So those are just two examples. And the people are also very different. I want you to also know the people who thrive in the startup world are slightly different than the people who thrive in the big corporate world as well. Not completely different, but slightly different. You got to be a little bit differently built to go and try out a startup than you have to try out a job.
Thank you, Sanchan. It has been a fascinating conversation. Over to Professor Noah.
Yes, Sanchan, thank you again very much. Actually, you mentioned your YouTube channel. Do you want to just repeat that again? Because I think there's a great deal of knowledge and wealth up there. And for those that felt like we just skimmed the surface of all that you have to offer, can you tell us a little bit about that again?
So if you go to YouTube and search for The Real Sanchan, TheRealSanchan, The Real Sanchan, you're going to get real talk. And there's a lot of stuff I talk about over there. So you can follow me on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram as well. I'm there as well.
Great. Thank you so much for taking an hour of your incredibly busy, valuable time with us today. I found this super fascinating. I'm sure that our audience did. And really just a pleasure getting to chat with you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lovish, thank you for helping set this up. Digital INSEAD, thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, etc., wherever you might be. And thank you for coming today. Take care, everyone.